Hi, and welcome. I'm Stephanie Miller, Director of Public Relations at HOK. For the next 30 minutes or so, we are discussing the future of stadium design and especially lessons learned from the 2026 World Cup. By any measure, the 26 World Cup was a massive success. Over 6.5 million fans attended games, doubling the attendance of the most recent World Cups, both in Russia and Qatar. The tournament also helped FIFA shatter previous revenue records, with the International Soccer Organization expected to generate an estimated $13 billion from ticket sales, television rights, and sponsorships. But beyond the numbers, the tournament offered something equally valuable, a glimpse into the future of stadium design. The World Cup tested venues at an unprecedented scale, revealing new opportunities, new challenges, and important lessons for architects, owners, and operators. And that's what we're focusing on today. We are going to explore what worked, what surprised us, what this year's tournaments can teach us about the next generation of sport and entertainment venues. And I'm joined by two experts, my colleagues Rashed Singaby, who is HOK's Director of Sport, Rec, and Entertainment, and his colleague and our colleague, John Rhodes, also a Director of Sport, Rec, and Entertainment International. So we encourage everyone who is watching on LinkedIn to post questions and comments in the comment section. We will integrate as many of them into our conversation as possible. But there's a lot we want to unpack. So let's begin. Opening observations. From the games that you watched or I know attended, Rashed especially, what stood out when it came to the stadiums themselves? Were there fan experience, operational or design elements that you thought were especially successful or unsuccessful?
Well, good morning. It's an interesting topic. I think the World Cup has been an exhilarating time this summer. Really created a memorable summer, and a lot of the football fans worldwide are going through heavy withdrawal right now after the tournament is over. What I think really just like at a very high level, what stood out in this tournament, or what was maybe a pleasant surprise, was the NFL stadiums that hosted soccer, and it was almost like a surprise hit to the world. Like the sheer scale gave fans the amplified atmospheres that exceeded their expectations. And it's kind of like the soccer infrastructure no one expected to witness in North America. But maybe what some have missed is that the most recent generation of NFL stadiums have been the defining benchmark for global stadium development as it relates to trends and so on. So it was really great to see the inventory of large North American venues really become the backdrop of this global event. From an experience standpoint, those stadiums delivered. Just like some of the trends that those stadiums have drove over the past decade or so have been really related to fan experience, and that stood out to everyone during this tournament. I'll start with this as an opening word. The words. I think the start of the show here became the American venues as they pleasantly surprised the world.
John, your kind of overall observations of the whole tournament?
Well, clearly I'm across the pond, so maybe slightly different perception. For me, it's actually just really the ambition and scale of the event. I think is really unprecedented. The event over 3 countries, be it Mexico, Canada, the US, and really the complexity of doing that for a major event is challenging. Each of these countries will have different regulations, languages even. So how to really host an event across 3 countries, is not without its challenges. I think the other, as Rashed was suggesting, is the scale of the venues. I think this is the first time we'll have seen so many stadiums in a World Cup that are over 80,000 capacity. And to see even sort of the mid-table games being played in stadiums in that scale is just quite remarkable. And so really exciting to see so much football with so many people watching it live which is unprecedented, I think.
Well, beyond the massive scale of the entire tournament and the venues themselves, already, Rashed, you led in with this about most of the venues, especially those in the US, were designed for American football almost exclusively. There are stadiums like Mercedes-Benz, our stadium, that always has hosted soccer and football, but many of them have not had to make that transition. So, what did you take away as lessons learned about that need for flexibility, both in the field of play and for the venue itself, maybe hospitality, premium, other aspects of the experience?
Uh, well, I think a few things. It's a loaded question, and I think that one, there is something to acknowledge. While the NFL venues delivered from a scale and experience standpoint, and really exceeded expectations in terms of the experience portion, but it also the experience didn't come without challenges, and it really highlighted some of the difference between the nature of the sport. The American football versus global football, the gameplay is different, and that typically will dictate different design approaches when it comes to these venues. And with the North American venues being most of them focused on American football, some of the weaknesses that stood out. I guess one of the main ones to highlight is was visible in the 15-minute break of soccer. Like there's a halftime where everyone leaves their seats to visit a restroom or a concession or walk in the concourse, and because of that focused break period or recess, the concourses suffered, and that was obvious. So that weakened the experiences a little bit as it relates to service and getting people back to their seats quickly. And the fans, when they measure the experience, yes, the game is great, the seat is great, but the experience really goes beyond just the seat in the stadium. So that's maybe one thing to highlight, and the new generation of soccer specific stadiums that are being designed in the U.S. take that into consideration a lot more. It's like the gush of people. How can you filter people through in and out the bowl very quickly? As it relates to flexibility, now we saw that the stadiums, the NFL stadiums in particular, they had to go through some retrofits or some adjustments to their lower bowl to accommodate the soccer pitch. And while the geometry was there, while the footprint was there, in some cases, I mean, it's not an absolute description, but in some cases, some venues were a little more flexible than others. And if we are going to be as a continent, and as a country here, embracing the soccer culture and seeing it grow, the current growth that we're having here, we should expect that transformation and turnover between the event type to happen more frequently. It doesn't mean that the NFL stadiums are not going to be used again for soccer because there are soccer specific venues. There are games that attract more fans or viewers than the 25,000, 30,000 capacity of soccer stadiums, and they need the NFL stadiums, and they need the larger 60 and 70 and 80,000 seat stadiums. So we will see this happen a lot more. So I think the flexibility of turnover between the event and how we service people at the concourse may be the like one of the two that I would highlight that were weaknesses that can be improved upon.
I think from a European perspective, I think what was evident on TV was really obviously when you've got an NFL stadium, the field of play is much smaller. So introducing the FIFA football field of play obviously compromises some of the seats at the edges, and that really manifests in actually in certain stadiums there was a vertical barrier where you really want to get people as close to the field of play as possible and really close to the players at their level. There was a vertical height difference, which I think hopefully future generations of stadium will resolve that. If there's more football out there, there's more energy going into ensuring that in football mode there's more authenticism in terms of getting people closer to the pitch. Now that might even be raising the pitch as well, whichever way you look at it. But I think that came across in some of the stadiums. But That said, at the same time, the colossal numbers of people in those stadiums really didn't take away, from that atmosphere. So I think that's just that balance between the two. Clearly, I think a lot of the commentators and such like were, where they were located was very different as well to maybe some of the traditional football stadiums in Europe. And there was a lot of discussion about being at the back of the bowl where they would like to be, more prominent within their location. But it's a World Cup. There's lots of different commentators. So, how do you achieve that in a FIFA overlay, which is always challenging. But, for me, I think, the energy of the stadium really came through on the TV. But there is that visual impairment on some of the stadiums where there was a wall where you would normally get, the NFL players hanging out, or because the stadium geometry didn't quite fit, which I think the next generations will really resolve.
Yeah. And I think, Stephanie, this could, I started by saying this is a loaded question because we can talk about just this question for the next half hour.
Right.
But I'll single out one other thing that stood out, and we saw it, and it was actually a topic of of high discussion during the tournament, which is the flexibility of sponsorship, and that's also something that we understand what the sponsorship and partnership means for these venues. And as designers, we always think about how can we, from day one in the design, integrate sponsorship, the layer of sponsorship and partnership in the design, so it's intentional, it's not an afterthought, and it doesn't become redundant layers of architecture that are added on later. And I think we do that very well. But one thing that the tournament highlighted is an organization like FIFA. They have their own assortment or body of partnerships that they needed to highlight in those stadiums. And in some cases, we've seen naming rights hidden by tarps on stadium facades. And what does that tell us about the need for flexible sponsorship when it comes to circumstances like these? Because if it happened once, it's not going to be the last time. We can start to see organizing bodies coming with their body of sponsorship, and they would like to display them on those venues as they host those events. So it starts to tell us something like, is the future of partnership and particularly sponsorship, is it more digital than it is static? And some of it is already heading in that direction. And the idea is that now, like the asset, the space that's being sold is not an object, but it's time that appears on a flexible screen or in some other way. Could we even go as far as seeing potentially stadium roofs becoming a digital canvas to display naming rights flexibly? Naming rights holder messaging and almost like the sphere in Vegas in a way, and how it changes. Does that become something that designers start to think of to allow for flexible sponsorship in the future?
So moving from maybe the outside in, let's say, John, in the past, you in particular have said the future of stadium design, and I'm quoting, will be defined by a shift from spectacle to experience. What does that mean in practice, and how will that influence the way that you as architects and designers think about the fan journey?
Well, look, I mean, when we talk about fan journey, we often talk about this idea of street to seat experience. So really from when you buy your ticket to actually when you actually return home from experiencing the event. And I think, that is dynamically changing. So really, it's not just about the stadium experience. It's about your movement through the campus. It's about your transport plan getting there. And it's about actually even just buying the ticket in the first place. So, but that emergence between the physical and digital space is key to that. So that, you buy a ticket, but your digital experience travels through with you all through the event and post-event. So I think, look, really the future is, I think as stadium designers really need to focus in on that journey, and in particular where people touch the building or where there actually is an interface with the building, with the architecture. Things such as security or ticket checking and such like really needs to be considered to ensure that it's, as frictionless as possible and as enjoyable as possible, and not distract away from the core experience that you're getting there. And then, of course, we need to ensure that we're showcasing the event in the best possible way. You're going there to experience something. So that needs to be exemplar in terms of what you're seeing, in terms of what you're hearing, and all of those kind of things. So for me, these touch points are really to understand. to understand in relation to that, and actually really looking at the way that we can actually make that experience more bespoke for individuals as we get more, we really understand how people move through these buildings and actually can connect it to their digital journey as well. I think it's much more easy for us to actually start to consider a bespoke experience for every patron in the future.
So thank you, Dina, for joining us. We, as always, have to be flexible ourselves. We had some technical difficulties earlier, but Dina Lamanna is joining us. She is the Director of Hospitality Interior Design with HOK and is currently working on multiple sports projects. And Dina, your timing is perfect because I wanted to then continue the conversation, that idea that John was just talking about the spectacle and the experience and street to seat. It's really about the fan and this feeling of hospitality and of celebration, and premium spaces are increasingly part of that conversation. They continue to evolve across all sports venues. What trends are you seeing in how clubs and leagues and venue operators as well think about hospitality, and what could the stadiums, the ones that were just under a microscope, what could they begin to do better?
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, everybody. I think, stadium design is going in the same direction that human beings are going. We're not one dimensional. And so the sport entertainment world is not just about the game, it's about the show within the show, the pre show, the game while it's going on, the after show. How do we set up each leg of the event to really elongate it, create micro experiences, more semi-private experiences within larger group experiences? It's multifaceted and it's multi-layered. Something as simple as what are we eating and how are we eating it is informing this international exposure to the game. FIFA does a really great job of layering in hospitality requirements, fine dining, sometimes white tablecloths. And in the States, we're so used to finger foods, right? And kind of eating, chatting and chewing. So I think mixing that together and breaking bread is so symbolic, not just as design, but as how culture and people come together and really make these games a lasting experience. And so our job is to really celebrate that and carve out the right envelopes and the right sizes of spaces to support that.
Well, and you've talked, Dina, about it's one thing on the fan side to have this white tablecloth, china, actual glassware experience, but operationally, those venues may not have been designed to deliver that level of service. So, what does it make you think about when you're going to talk to your next stadium client and they might push back about some of the kitchen requirements or other kinds of service and operational elements?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think over the last few years, we focused a lot on duality, meaning non-game day activation and special events. But I think we also need duality on the operational side. What's really happening in these back of house concourses and circulation areas, really when you go during an event or a game, it's a pre-setup. They're being used for additional requirements per event. So in this case, in the World Cup, what we're understanding is just, again, bringing in glassware. If a stadium is 100% disposable, you need portable dishwashers and you need availability to kind of prop that up and store them. And so I think it's helping us to understand that we need flex on the operational level. Parking lot space is being used to accommodate these additional bells and whistles. How do we allow a little bit of flex around the footprint of entrances and exits and freight spaces? So it's really the sense of duality is beyond just what the fan sees. It's how these facilities are being run and how we can best support the ops teams, because we all know design is as good as you feel the service. And so if the service is operating at an A+ level, the experience will be an A+ level.
So Rashed and John, you both are engaged with the premium conversation, the operational. Any comments you want to make about the topic?
Well, I think, for FIFA have very specific requirements for their stadiums during the event, and quite often the stadiums don't have the capacity to deal with the hospitality that they require. So creating that ability to flex for these stadiums is key. You may need to add additional suites within there. So the idea that the lounges can actually be subdivided just for the event is something that's worth considering when you're planning these projects. I think really for me the hospitality really ties back to that street to seat discussion in terms of I think we're moving in a more really tailored experience where you can add on to your experience during the day, and I think we need to design in the inventory that allows you to do that, be that access to specific additional bars or back of house areas that are kind of special experiences around the stadium. And so I think that all comes into that big experiential picture that makes up your hospitality package.
The one thing I would maybe add to this is that the same pressure that we saw on the concourses is also faced by the premium amenities, and maybe even exponentially more, because as a premium hospitality guest, you expect the premium treatment and understanding how to relieve the pressure of the 15-minute break, and make sure that it's not just a pleasant experience from a hospitality standpoint, but also from the speed of transaction and the speed of going through the club and the speed of getting to what you need. That is part of the experience. People will remember the frictionless, pain point free experience a lot more, and I think that's the one thing that any soccer event being hosted in a venue would need to the soccer venues would need to continue to improve that. And I think we've made great strides with that over the past five plus years, but there's still more room to improve. It's not fully ironed out when it comes to
I completely
yeah.
I completely agree with you, Rashid. I think but one of the big challenges we've got is that there's demand for premium, and we all know that the revenue that it creates is welcomed.
Right.
But at the end of the day, we've got to ensure that intervention of adding that premium doesn't take away from the collective experience. That collective effervescence isn't actually reduced because there's too much premium, there's too many gaps in the stadium. So I think it's really a real challenge to balance that, to ensure that the energy is contained in that stadium. And I think that's the next frontier of how you can create wonderful premium products, but without creating gaps in the stadium that actually allow the energy to leak out. Clearly, software is going to help us do that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So this was a different tournament for a couple different reasons. One of them was that there was a hydration break. And so part of the conversation has to be about the issue of climate adaptation, that we had torrential rains the day before, we had smoke, forest fire smoke, there is extreme heat as growing challenges. So how, looking forward, do you all think we need to approach the design of stadiums, whether it's for a FIFA World Cup or any venue, to be adaptable to the changing climate?
Go ahead, John.
Well, look, I mean, it's fundamental to any design, but certainly stadium design, and particularly when you're considering tournament buildings. So tournament stadiums, the show has to go on. So we have to build in resiliency to these stadiums that the event can happen, and that's not just in terms of broadcast, in terms of getting people there. It's in terms of the player welfare as well. So ensuring that the field of play is at the right temperature, that they can be at their best, I think is key. Now that with that comes the need for roofs in the first place. Even cooling in specific areas, or comfort cooling and such like. And that obviously comes with other challenges in terms of sustainability, the carbon footprint associated with those interventions. So I think there's a real balance for us to play to ensure that we can create these stadiums which are operationally low in terms of energy, but allow us to function within an environment which is challenged by that, by the sort of global warming. And it's a journey that we're all going to go on. Grass welfare, looking after the field of play. ensuring that that field of play is suitable for a tournament where it's going to get battered over a series of days. It's not just about one game at a weekend, series of games a week. Really looking at technology to allow us to keep that field of play in its best possible condition during that tournament, I think is a real key thing. And that means, understanding ventilation to the field of play, understanding the light to that field of play, and actually, the infrastructure needed to keep it irrigated, to keep it well. So all of these things come into discussion, but it is this balance between, our responsibility of designers to try and reduce operational energy and carbon embodied energy, but at the same time ensure that there is resilience in the stadium, that the show can go on during that tournament.
Yeah, I think that this is something that it's not a surprise to us. That's something that's been on our radar for quite a while now. Is how can our stadiums be climate resilience? And I would divide that into like two main topics. One of them is really there's the fan comfort and experience, or like everyone, the comfort and experience of everyone in the stadium, from the fan to the staff to the players and then there's the sustainability the approach, where we know that these venues are by nature energy hogs, just to turn the lights on, the amount of energy that you're consuming here, and factoring in that now we're facing higher temperature, and seeing, in particularly in the stadiums that do not have a roof or a conditioned dome or something like this, that this is where the hydration break is necessary. The semifinal between France and England was played in Miami, and the temperature was exceeding 86 degrees, and the humidity was close to 100%, and there's nothing that anyone can do other than just hope for a breeze to pass by. So I think something about how can we passively cool our venues is going to become not a nice to have, but a must have. One, because the AC alone is not going to do it anymore. From a sustainability standpoint and longevity standpoint and operationally, it's just not, we can't just keep making our ducts and air handling units bigger. So how can we actually allow for the stadium to cool itself from a fan comfort and experience standpoint, but also from a sustainability standpoint? So I would say that this is now a must. It's not, we've always approached these topics for years as, wouldn't it be nice if we adopt such a wonderful initiative like this? But now it's like, we need to do this. That's a must right now.
And for me, it's not just about the stadium as well. It's also about, your route to the stadium. Like it's around the edges as you get into that building. It's the holistic journey again that, you really have to understand that those microclimates and design towards them, and design in a responsible way. At least we've got the opportunity with these stadiums. They are big pieces of real estate. They do offer that opportunity to actually create, energy, and really, striving to create that, that balance between energy input and energy output is really where we need to take this.
Well, and you're segueing right into my next question. These are enormous community assets. What did this current World Cup show us about the importance of things like transportation, public space, and the broader experience that happens outside of that venue's walls?
Well, it's got to be accessible, right? Whether it's bringing folks from different countries and international visitors to our stadiums and vice versa. There's got to be an ease. There's a sense of travel and arrival. John, what you were just saying, I mean, it really starts on your arrival experience. That's when you start appreciating that you're at the game, you're having this experience. I think something as simple as, wayfinding in languages, using digital media as a way to flip between different languages and making it more accommodating and more hospitable for different folks of different strokes coming and visiting, and merging of cultures and nationalities. I think that's the true celebration and the beauty of soccer, right? It brings so much, so many different walks of life together. And how can we make each segue to the stadium, in the stadium, out of the stadium, that much easier and that much more friendly? So it doesn't feel like a barrier, the stadium itself and the lead up. And then you could say the same thing on an individual match on a non-game day? How does this vessel interact with the day-to-day community and support the day-to-day community needs? So it's really a friendly integration. It's almost like the DNA gets woven into the roots of the neighborhood and not just an alien that's planted in field. I know Rashed and I have had nauseating amounts of conversations about that, but
Look, I mean, for me, if you go to a World Cup game, it's an adventure. And clearly it might, you've got to travel a long way if you're from somewhere else in the world. So when you get there, the idea that you can actually really embrace the community, if you can really understand that community, and I think as a designers, really taking be it the stadium itself, the experiences within the stadium, or the spaces outside the stadium, as if we can really understand that place, that culture, and allow the stadium, the design to amplify that. So when you're there, you really do experience that place and make it special. I think that's something that we really, really, need to go after as designers, specifically for this building typology. It is about amplifying the place that it's in and the local community and culture.
Yeah, and I would add to this that really the most memorable moments, just kind of emphasizing the points of Dina and John here, really. The most memorable World Cup moments really happened outside of the stadium. It's not in the stadium. It's not it's the festivals, the civic parks, the streets, the plazas, the spaces that allowed thousands to congregate and cheer their hearts out. It's kind of the living rooms of the cities in a way. Which highlighted something that we've been advocates of for quite a while now. The future stadium is not a standalone venue. It's really a mobility hub. It's a public realm generator, if you will, a cultural destination, and integrating it as an economic catalyst embedded within a larger district has so many more benefits than having it being a standalone venue. So I think the success for venues in the future will be measured by not by how many people fit inside the bowl, but by how effectively the project connects people to the city around it. This will become a no-brainer, because we've all known that historically stadiums tended to be built outside the city bounds on large lots, parking lots, islands of asphalts, if you will. Getting to them was hard. Leaving was hard. Yes, it stood as an icon, but it was really an isolated icon that's active for a handful of days a year. Now it's not the economics of the event day, it's the economics of daily use. How is it helping the district? How is it helping? So in part, what we would do to create the cities, to empower the city's living room, is actually what the economy and the industry needs to leverage the asset of a stadium in a much more effective way.
Well, we are coming up on our time limit, but looking forward, we have 2030 in the sights for, and again, will be interesting, spread across 3 countries, and in Spain, Portugal, and Morocco, and then beyond that, Saudi Arabia. What are the most important lessons learned for the operators, the clubs, the teams, the designers, as they're looking out at these next 2 milestones, and for you all designing other venues across the world?
I think it echoes some of the first statements when I was joining staff. I think it really just allowing, we always have contingencies in architecture and construction. I think we need some contingencies in the footprint of these stadiums. I think we all know there's things that we don't know. And so if we can bake in a little wiggle room into how we're designing these facilities, sometimes that answer or that problem that we're trying to solve is actually halfway through the design process. So if there's a little flex, if there's a little give in the building, we can make adjustments. And then once the construction is complete, the ops team has some abilities to adjust and tap dance as the ever-growing needs changes. And so I think that's really rung home after bringing FIFA here, that we need to adapt with the change. We need to please our fans on all levels, from ground up and vice versa. And so I'm looking forward to being more curious and flexible myself in the process going forward.
Rashed, John, biggest lessons learned?
Lessons learned that will help the future. I think the
Yeah.
fans will be looking for frictionless everything, and we're there. We're getting there. I think it's just there's going to be more pressure on creating the stadium that really is minimizing any friction points, whether it's the ticket scanning, the concession queues, the dynamic wayfinding. How can we minimize friction? I think is going to be a fundamental expectation and not a nice to have. Also, the stadium neighborhood versus the stadium, and I know we talked about this. I think the stadium neighborhood versus the stadium itself is also another expectation. People want to go to the stadium, and they're not asking where's my seat. They're asking what will I do for the next 8 hours, and what will they do for the next 8 hours, and how can we craft that experience. That will be an expectation, and will something that will need to be continue to evolve and improve. Operations and flexibility, all that stuff is a no-brainer, and the operators of the buildings, they're thinking about that maybe even more than we are right now. We just need to stay aligned and continue to help them innovate on that front. I think from an experiential standpoint, we're seeing the rise of mixed reality glasses now, and they're soon going to become fashion pieces and more accepted. So delivering mixed reality experiences in games is not going to be a strange future expectation. It's going to be the norm. And how does the experience start to weave in right in front of your face, or to your phone, to give you immediate stats to your preferred players, or maybe have it like the commentating that's AI guided, that starts to narrate the game through the perspective of one or two players that you're focused on. There's a lot to nerd on when it comes to the technology and where it's heading as well too. But it's going to be exciting to see where it heads, because technology is moving very fast, and the benchmark and the bar that was set with this tournament now is going to be hard to beat. So there's a lot of work to do.
Well, I think on that, Rashid, as I sort of started with, the scale of the event, the scale of the stadiums is one thing. And, future World Cups are going to have to start to look, how can they deliver those capacities? Most stadiums, you're at, 50 to 60, that would normally be the kind of environment you're playing in. How do you get that additional capacity in for these tournaments? Is there a way of actually designing in temporary seating and such like that you can take away post-event in legacy mode? So I think that's one thing, and that's a design challenge for all of us that we've been looking at anyway. I think the other thing is really, we talked about technology, but just on a very basic level, a lot of these big NFL stadiums, the AV is different. It's the Halo boards in both SoFi and in Atlanta. It's a significant game changer for the people, not just in the stadium, but also the TV experience as well. So the expectation is going to be, where's our AV screens on these future football stadiums, these future events? And I think, we need to think about how we design those in, and we need to design them in so they don't take away or distract from the real football. They need to complement that experience. But I think there's going to be a demand for that. Clearly, it's more economic to deliver nowadays. So I think there are two big things. One is capacity. Two is that AV experience. We'll need to really focus on that in the future events.
Well, thank you, all three of you. So much to unpack, but we heard a lot about flexibility, about operations driving the fan experience, ultimately that street to seat, that bespoke experience, whether that's about technology or high touch, premium. And I really liked the point about always balancing that premium experience with the GA experience, the general, the maybe more hardcore fan, that energy, and then tech across all aspects of the venue. So for everyone who joined us, if you have other questions and comments we weren't able to get to, please leave them in the comment section. We will try and respond to them. This will be recorded, so you can come back to it or share it with others. If you don't follow our folks on LinkedIn, please do. And thanks very much. We'll see you next time.